Hello and welcome to another podcast from the Southend GP Vocational Training Scheme. My name is Alan Kerry and I'm joined by Sunil Gupta, and we're going to discuss the topic of how to deal with a difficult colleague. So Sunil, what are some of the reasons that a colleague may come across as being difficult?
There are many reasons. One of them could be that the colleague themselves are stressed, and they could be stressed for a number of reasons. They could be having a relationship problem with a member of their own family. Someone in their family could be ill. They could have money or other problems. They could be under pressure to meet targets. They could be tired due to lack of sleep due to young children at home, or they could be just having a bad day. So one thing is they could be stressed, but there's other reasons why we could perceive a colleague as being difficult. It could be that they just have poor social skills, that the way they say things comes across as being abrupt or rude, when it's just they can't put things in a better way. It could be that they've got very high expectations, that they want to provide a very high quality service. They have very high expectations of themselves, and they also have very high expectations of the people they work with. Another reason why colleagues could be difficult is if they have got some sort of illness. Now that could be a physical illness. If someone's in pain or distress, that makes you more irritable, makes the relationship with colleagues difficult. They could have psychological problems. They could be depressed, anxious, burnt out. They could have addiction problems. They could be addicted to alcohol, drugs. So we've talked about they could be stressed, we've talked about poor social skills, high expectations, illness in the difficult colleague. There's other reasons as well. There could be a personality clash involved. You might find that particular colleague difficult, but other people get on with them fine. There could be a cultural way. They were treated the same way in the past and they think it's the correct behaviour, particularly in medicine, in terms of what is the correct way to deal with a junior colleague. How abrupt can you be? How authoritarian can you be? What's acceptable in the way a consultant deals with a junior hospital doctor? And the other reason why colleagues could be difficult is, frankly, they could have learnt that they benefit from this behaviour. They've learnt that if they're awkward, if they're stroppy, if they cause trouble, it enables them to get away with doing less work, or it gives them a feeling of importance and power.
Thank you. I wonder, what are some of our options when deciding what to do about a difficult colleague?
I think it's important to think through your options, because it's very easy to just react to what happens to you, to what someone says. And sometimes it's worth to sort of step back, think, what are my options? What could I do? I could just react to them, or the first thing I could do is I could just ignore the behaviour, be polite and sort of minimise contact. So a colleague makes a remark to you, you don't react to it, you don't start a big argument with them, you're just polite, you minimise the contact with them. The second thing is you can confront them in an assertive way. You can say, when you said that to me, that made me feel humiliated. When you behave in a certain way, that makes me feel that you're behaving unfairly. The other thing you could do is you could speak to colleagues, family, friends to try and get social support, allies and ideas about how you could deal with this problem colleague. Other options, and none of these options are mutually exclusive, is you could keep a written record of their behaviour if you feel that you need to be able to provide evidence at a later stage of a systematic way that you're being treated. And if you just came across with just one incident and people would say, oh, you're just overreacting, get over it, by providing a systematic record of contemporaneously recorded how they behave towards you, that enables you to provide evidence. The other thing you can do is look to yourself. Is there any way you can improve your own communication and assertiveness skills in terms of how to deal with that person, so that they don't pick on you and they look for another victim? The other thing you can do is try to minimise the effect the colleague has on you and to do things to reduce your stress levels. So the things about trying to do regular exercise and trying to not let them have their effect, because sometimes difficult colleagues get pleasure from causing trouble, and if they feel that they're having an effect on you, that makes them maybe pick on you more. And the other thing you can do, if you feel it's really getting out of hand, is to sort of think about making a verbal or written complaint about their behaviour to your boss.
What factors should you take into account before deciding what your best plan of action is?
Again, it is worth thinking it through, because there's some times where you should do something and sometimes where it's best not to, because you've got to think what's in my best long-term interests. And you've got to take into account the power difference between you and the difficult colleague. If the person is your boss, if they have a great deal of power over you, then you've got to think much more carefully before starting a process in terms of trying to complain about them. That doesn't mean you don't think about that and you don't complain about it, but you just got to be aware of the possible repercussions. The other thing you need to think about is the amount of contact you have with that difficult colleague. If it's a colleague at the same level, you're only hardly ever on call at the same time, you can avoid them a lot of the time, then is it worth creating an enormous fuss to try and complain about them when you can sort of minimise the contact you have with them? The other thing is, how much is the behaviour, what effect is the behaviour having on you? Is it having an enormous effect? Is it not bothering you too much? Another thing to take into account in deciding what the best action is do your colleagues agree with your opinion? You might have a particular opinion about a colleague. When you talk with your friends, they might not. They might say, "Oh, he's just like that. Ignore him." And the other thing is, how many allies can you get on your side? Because if you have a particular opinion about that colleague, but that colleague has a great deal of power and influence, and most other people in the department are more likely to be on their side, then you've got to think, is it a battle I should fight? And the other thing in a medical context particularly is patient care being affected? Because if patient care is being affected, then the General Medical Council says we have a duty to ensure that patient care, that we take action if the behaviour of a colleague is affecting patient care.
Quite so, yeah. So in summary, when we're dealing with a difficult colleague, our advice is to consider the reason why a colleague could be difficult, speak to people you trust, think through your options and the advantages and disadvantages of each of the options, and try to make a considered plan of action. Thank you very much, Sunil.